morning, everyone. I'm Shankar Dhanasekaran, co-founder and CTO of Thalam Auroville. Today, I'm thrilled to be here to share with you the lessons I have learned while building software infrastructure for the city of Auroville. Before I go further, here is the brief outline of this talk. Who am I? That's the regular bio stuff about who am I as a person and what do I do. Then we will explore what Auroville is, what are the challenges it faces. I will provide you an overview of the different tools that are built for Auroville using Elixir. It is important to understand the context in which these lessons are learned to appreciate their relevance to your own problem in a different context. Then we'll look into our journey into Elixir. Auroville did not start with Elixir, obviously, because we are a 55-plus-year-old organization, and we are into IT and the web space for more than 25 years now. The lessons learned are all through this journey, and I have interpolated and sandwiched these lessons all through the stories that I'm going to share now. With the journeys covered, we will see the roadblocks we faced in migrating to Elixir. My belief is that this is a shared problem that most of us in Elixir community face today. I'll also share how Thalam Auroville is already contributing in the solution space for the common problems, the shared problems that we face in the Elixir community. And then looking into future, I will share those developments in the Elixir community that excites us and how we wish to use them in Auroville. And then I will introduce my friend Hikari, who is not here, but still present here in a way. Finally, I'll share a small and pleasant surprise for the founders, active maintainers, and every single contributor of the Elixir community. I won't share anything, I won't tell you anything more about it now, otherwise it's no more a surprise. After that, if time permits, we'll have a Q&A session. If not, I'll be here throughout the conference, and you can catch me anytime, and we can have a chat. So we have a lot to cover, and let's get started. That's me and my little Elixir family. My 19-year-old son is learning and working with Elixir for the last 4 years. My daughter is 12 years old and is in the pipeline to learn Elixir later this year. My wife is a CT technician who is also here in this conference, and she hopes to say hello world in Elixir by the end of this conference. I'm an accidental programmer, and I enjoy doing this stuff for more than 15 years now. You can find me on the internet as Shankar Devi, on GitHub and Twitter, though I don't tweet so often. I'm the co-founder and CTO of Thalam, a team that takes care of professional software development for the city of Auroville. Before that, I worked with various other languages and frameworks, from PHP and Python to Ruby and Django. I could have made this slide even more uglier with all the different logos from all the different languages and frameworks that I learned. But my brother, who is also sitting here, was deciding against it, and he said, like, this is enough. So apart from programming, I love literature and philosophy and contributing to a better world. My life at Auroville is entirely dedicated to the last part. Much of my view towards life is shaped by Charles Eisenstein's Sacred Economics. Who in here has read about this book, Sacred Economics? Okay, it's a very good book. I love it. And that's one of the books that shaped my worldview. And then Auroville's Dream and the Charter. So that's about me. So what is Auroville? Where is it? Auroville is an international township whose boundary is in the form of a circle of 2.5-kilometer radius, covering an area of 20 square kilometers. Auroville is located in south of India. But that's just the physical description of Auroville. The way I see it, and I would like to describe Auroville, is that it is the world's first open source city, prototyping an ideal society of 50,000 volunteers. Mira Alfaza, affectionately called the Mother, is the founder of Auroville. She created Auroville as a place that belongs to nobody in particular, but belongs to humanity as a whole. That's exactly what I refer to as an open source city. In 1966, UNESCO passed an unanimous resolution commending Auroville as a project of importance for the future of humanity. Today, Auroville is recognized as the first and the only internationally endorsed ongoing experiment in human unity and transformation of consciousness. So how does Elixir help Auroville? 2 million connections on a single node, a highly complex mesh of thousands of services interacting with each other in real time, saving tens and thousands of dollars in infrastructure expense? No, seriously, none of this. We have heard enough of these stories from companies for whom Elixir does all this magic. Yeah. Today, I want to share a different story, a different perspective. A story that I feel is very important and very relevant for so many of us who haven't used Elixir, or for so many of us who are working with smaller companies. So what does Elixir solve for us? To answer that, let's go back in time in 2016. Is Jose still here? Okay, it's not here, but let's see. The answer was shared way back in 2016 when Jose Valim introduced Phoenix in the GoTo conference. It also applies to the Elixir ecosystem in general. Does anyone here remember what it is? The clue here is that he also shared this picture of 2 pills. Anyone? Okay, there you go.
So, if I remember correctly, yeah, basically it's how the beam runs diagram.
Yeah, he talked about a lot of beam stuff, but he specifically talked about Phoenix. When he was just about to introduce Phoenix, he was saying something about it. Okay, let me answer. And I actually suggest you to watch this video. Apart from being a very good introduction to Phoenix, you can see Jose full of energy and almost dancing on the stage as he introduces the uniqueness of Phoenix. So what's the message? Don't choose between performance and productivity. Have both. So what Elixir solves for Auroville is the complexity problem by delivering higher productivity and developer happiness. I think this is one of the less valued and less seen benefit of Elixir. This is something you will see me repeating as a recurrent theme in this talk. But don't get me wrong. Elixir community focuses so much on the productivity of the developer. We also saw in the keynote yesterday by Jose Valim that this developer experience is of the highest priority, and many of the new cool features are coming with LiveView. Everyone who uses Elixir absolutely love this developer experience. What I mean here is that the message of Elixir as a language that provides a scalable solution often overshadows the message that it is highly productive. Or people think Elixir is only productive for companies with large problems, and it is not for them. And given its Erlang background, most people who think of Elixir for the first time think of it as a large beast that is difficult to learn, or they only need it if they have a web scale problem to solve. Auroville is not the next Spotify, Netflix, or WhatsApp. We don't have the problem of web scale. The only problem with scale is that we have no scale. Without scale, we don't have the problem of performance. But indeed, Auroville has the problem of complexity. Auroville needs everything that a city needs, but at a very small scale. That's exactly the point why Elixir is important for us. If you're like me, you might be wondering, how does any lesson learned in the context of Auroville actually relate to you? Because not everyone faces the challenges or works in the domain of building software for a city. Whether you are a tech startup building your next big product, or an organization wanting to build tools for your own internal efficiency, you might share many of the Auroville's constraints and needs. I have met enough startups and organizations to believe that these constraints are almost universal, and the lessons learned and shared here or useful for a large number of small organizations. There are audiences in this hall who might be wanting to learn Elixir apart from people who are already loving Elixir. This talk is also getting recorded and live streamed, and it would be potentially viewed by more people who haven't tried Elixir. So here is my first takeaway for this presentation. If you could get out of this hall just with this one message and spread it, you are doing a great service for yourself and for the Elixir community. Elixir is a game changer and an enabler for small organizations. Let's get that right. If you're a small organization, you need Elixir more than anyone else, because large organizations can afford to waste. They can afford to solve the problem by many other means, like spending more money and bringing in more people, etc. But as a small organization, your choices are very limited, and Elixir is the best choice out there in my experience. My friend Hikari has put this nicely as a haiku. Web scale, not for all, not the all. Complexity without scale matter. Elixir solves both gracefully. So back to the context of Auroville. Services in Auroville that are powered by Elixir span across multiple sectors. And today, they broadly cover these 7 sectors, totaling more than 25 plus applications. And these are the applications that are needed for the city, and this is on the rise. In short, Elixir powers Auroville in so many fronts, be it the money you pay in a coffee shop as a guest, or having your resident record properly administered in Auroville. Elixir is playing a vital role. When I said the problem we are trying to solve with Auroville is the problem of complexity, or problem of conquering complexity, it is basically visible in these numbers that you see on this slide. For a population of about 3,000 odd people, we have more than 120 municipal services. Auroville has attracted highly creative people from all over the world, resulting in a highly entrepreneurial community running more than 350 plus businesses. The sheer disproportion of the population to the services and the businesses offered in Auroville means Auroville requires everything a bigger city needs, but in a very small scale. Unfortunately, software is one thing that costs more or less the same whether you build it for one person or 1,000 people. I want to highlight 3 different products using Elixir in Auroville in this talk. There are so many of them. I just want to highlight just the top 3 or most important or illustrative applications. The first one is Thalam Pay, a product that provides digital payment solutions in Auroville, accepting money from students, guests, donors, and customers from all over the world. Due to various legal and administrative reasons that I won't discuss here, Auroville required this payment service that acts like an adapter for a popular payment gateway in India called Razorpay. Think of it like Stripe in Europe or US. And also works directly with ICICI Bank's API, another popular bank, private bank in India for providing payment services. Thalam Pay provides several payment channels such as payment gateway, regular bank transfers, UPI payment. UPI payment is one of India's very popular and indigenous method of payment, where you get an email address like string for sending and accepting payments. And a QR code payment, which is like a QR code representation of the UPI ID with some additional metadata for payment tracking. Regular swiping machines, but linked with an API for real-time accounting. Prepaid cards with auto-loading of money from a bank through an API. The application built in Elixir also provides daily email reports to the merchants, integration with other financial systems in Auroville, merchant dashboard, admin dashboard, API for integrating with banks, API for integrating with a payment gateway, and so on. In terms of complexity, this is it's a fairly big and complex project with a lot of user stories for each of the payment channels and services offered in this application. The approach we take is to use a Phoenix umbrella with multiple web apps with one shared database. I'm not advocating that this is the best approach for every situation. For us, for the scale of our operation, the size of our development team, this approach gives better value. So what is the volume of our business using ThalamPay? It is currently used by more than 250 plus merchants. In the last 1 year, it has processed more than 80 million worth of transaction in Indian rupee and has served more than 100,000 customers. And the catch here is that this service that provides so many integration with third-party payment gateway and commercial banks is created and maintained by 3 developers who are only working part-time on this project. I couldn't imagine doing the same thing with any other language or framework that I have worked with in the past. The second application that I want to share is called Matrimandir Booking System. Matrimandir is the soul of Auroville. In the words of the founder, it is a place for people trying to find one's consciousness. Every year, millions of people come to Matrimandir viewpoint, and about 100,000 people meditate inside the Matrimandir. The viewpoint requires a parking fee for motor vehicles, and the meditation inside the Matrimandir chamber requires a prayer booking. The software for both parking fee management and booking for meditation are powered by Phoenix. The catch here is that this project was developed by one part-time developer. The last application that I want to highlight is guest registration service, which registers guests from all over the world to stay in 80 plus guest houses within Auroville to live and experience the life in Auroville for a short period of time. One of the challenges we faced in this project is the highly intuitive UI that the guest service team asked us to build. Since they handle a large volume of guests in a short period of time, they wanted a customized UI in a very specific way that is optimized for their business workflow. In most cases, a complex UI that demands user to do multiple clicks, navigate to several pages to perform a specific task is more easy to program than an intuitive UI that effectively gets the same job done with minimal overheads. Without Phoenix LiveView, this project would have invited a large number of JavaScript libraries, relying on front-end frameworks like React or Vue.js, and an API development, a back-end stuff, all these things. We solved this with Phoenix LiveView, which not only delivered a product that the business team appreciates, but also made the developer's life easy. And then here, we did this with 3 junior developers who are learning web development for the very first time, guided by 1 senior developer. That's for the brief introduction to Auroville and the projects we do with Elixir. Now, let's move on to the journey with Elixir and the lessons learned. So why did we move to Elixir? One, I could tell like this is like I had an extraordinary intuitive design choice that I made a decade ago, but that's not the story. Elixir was one of the many technologies that I tried around 2013 and 14. One main reason I started exploring Elixir was because of Peep Code publishing this interview with Jose Valim. It's called Meet Elixir. I don't remember what exactly Jose said in this interview after many years now, but back then it got me hooked and I started playing with the language. Once I started playing with the language, I started loving it for its simplicity. For the first time, I felt I was in control of the code that I wrote because Elixir had less magic. It was verbose, more verbose than Ruby, which I was using back then. But in terms of clarity, a program written in Elixir was clearer for me than it was in any other language. At that time, I don't know how many of you are aware, there was a framework called Dynamo. Dynamo was the web framework and was the only web framework in Elixir. And it was easy to reason about, just like how Elixir is. Once the Phoenix framework was released, things became even more clearer. Phoenix was not just a feature-rich web framework than Dynamo, but also carried the simplicity of the language and did not add much magic to a plain Elixir app. It was at this time I listened to Lance talk, Phoenix is not your application, in ElixirConf Berlin in 2016. All this made total sense because I spent almost 8 years by that time struggling with frameworks with wrong kinds of abstraction and using it for the problems that I was trying to handle. Slowly, every project we worked on started using Elixir and Phoenix. As I mentioned at the beginning, Auroville has a long history with tech, and Elixir was one of the recent additions. To understand the advantages we see in this migration, a bit of the history before we moved on to Elixir actually helps. If I could summarize our journey in Thalam Auroville, I could summarize it in 3 different stages. 1, the ignorant hammer. 2, journey of Santiago, or wanderings in the rabbit holes. And 3, enlightened hammer. We'll see what these cryptic stages mean shortly. Stage 1, ignorant hammer. At that time, when I was first starting to contribute to Auroville software, I had to admit I was a Drupal fanatic. I was exactly like what this code signifies. Any problem that you throw at me, I looked into it through the lens of Drupal. That's the problem. It is not that the Drupal was bad. In fact, I learned a lot by studying its code. The fact is, Drupal is optimized to do certain things well. To do anything beyond what it is designed to do, it is going to make it unnecessarily complex. This is how Auroville's internet portal dependencies looked like in 2013. There were 37 core Drupal modules, 95 community-contributed modules, 50 custom modules, 3,000 lines of JavaScript, 6,000 lines of CSS, and for the sake of clarity, a module in Drupal means a library or a hex package in Elixir community. The intranet was trying to do everything that the community needed, from fundraising, donor management, to help desk tool for the public, all using a content management system. We did fairly well with this in the beginning, but gradually we began to see the weight of the hammer we were carrying. Slowly but steadily and more predictably, we started facing issues with introducing new features. The development time was too long and too often followed with breaking stuff that were once working fine. CSS and JavaScript grew over time exponentially as it was difficult to figure out what parts of the system still required that JavaScript or CSS. So we kept on adding new class names and new styles and new JavaScript without daring to remove the old ones. Just a quick side note, since we now moved to Phoenix LiveView with Tailwind, we don't have this problem with dead CSS or JavaScript anymore. This is a huge, huge benefit to reduce tech debt and avoid unexpected bugs. The list of problems with our old stack goes on, and I did not want to go into the details of all these issues here because as they matter much less than the lesson we learned in the process. So as my friend Hikari puts it again, this is the lesson we learned. Reuse or rewrite. Oh, sorry, I just went, okay, this one. Yeah, okay, correct. Yeah, so as my friend Hikari puts it again, this is the lesson we learned, which is don't overload. Don't overload anything beyond what a tool is designed to do. Anything beyond its intended design goal is actually going to make things even more difficult. Trying to use a Drupal CMS for non-content management stuff and stretching it as a framework to build web apps was one such example of overload. I have also seen people extending WordPress to do a rental platform, and then developers and business people who initially thought they gained so much by adopting these systems soon realized their limits. The next lesson we learned in this phase of our growth is that if it requires you to write significant code on top of a community-contributed library, it is better you don't use it, actually. In essence, apply the rule of reuse if and only if it solves your problem without you having to write a overriding behavior to the library in a significant manner. Again, if you go back to the example from Drupal, if you look at those 50 custom modules, at least 40 of them are about customizing or overriding 40 other community contributed modules. This is where the reuse principle is stretched beyond a point where it becomes harmful rather than being useful. So the next stage of our journey is what I call journey of Santiago, or wanderings in the rabbit holes. 2014 was an important year that I remember for so many reasons. It was the year I joined Auroville as a resident volunteer after many years of consulting for Auroville. But that apart, it was the year when I started actually looking for solutions for various software development issues we faced in Auroville. It was also the year Vue.js got released. Just a year ago, Facebook released their React.js library. And it was the year Meteor 1.0 got also released. And finally, we had Elixir 1.0 also got released in that year. And the first ever Elixir Conf was held, where Joseph Lim introduced the power and design rationale of the Elixir language. On the other hand, microservices as a methodology was gaining its momentum towards the end of 2014, as you can see in that Google Trends screenshot on this slide. With all this basically going around, I felt like there was a sudden explosion of various options that are available for me to explore. On top of that, I decided to quit my job and move to Auroville, which gave me all the time that I needed to play around with all these frameworks and methodologies. I liked Elixir for what it was, but it wasn't mature enough in 2014 to build web products with it. Ruby on Rails, on the other hand, was doing everything great, except until React and Vue.js showed to the world what a rich UI means. For the next 2 years, I spread out exploring all the various tools out there in JavaScript world and thought microservices would solve the problem we faced in building tools in Auroville. How cool will it be to at last have a freedom of choice? Every service can have its own tech stack, whichever is best suited for that service. On top of it is the choice of JavaScript framework that pretty much did the same thing, solved the same problem, but in a different way. Say, solved the problem with a different taste. This is the spoiler alert on how it went. Once the honeymoon period with microservices and new JavaScript frameworks was over, I soon realized unknowingly I signed up for several problems that did not exist before. Microservices solved one problem, but introduced 10 others that we were not even prepared to handle or even didn't think about it. Microservices increased complexity, costs, communication overheads, making it challenging for our small team to develop, test, and maintain such architecture. We spent roughly around 2 years from 2014 wandering in the rabbit holes of exploring the next perfect JavaScript framework or the right kind of microservices architecture, not knowing we won't find the solution for what we sought for in the wrong place. So why didn't microservices solve the problem for us? Here is the story from the episode of I Love Lucy that answers this question. Lucy has lost her earrings. I give you 10 seconds to enjoy reading it. While it is so obvious to see the flaw in Lucy's action, and we can laugh about it, it is very difficult to see it in our own actions when we search for solutions to our development woes. All the attention that these JavaScript and microservices had during those years was my own version of light out here is much better, or Google Trends is much better here. Yeah. So if there is one thing that we learned in this journey, using microservices architecture caused us more harm than any good for our work. Again, let me clarify. It wasn't microservices itself that was a bad idea. Our usage of it in the context of a small team with various resource constraints was a bad choice. Here again, we go with an haiku from my friend. Microservices escape, big firms thrive, small ones follow. Beware blind footsteps. Solutions are not universal, but contextual. Don't follow blindly. So now to the last part of our journey. All new applications that Thalam develops in Auroville today are powered by Elixir, and we feel it is the right technology to bet our next 10 years. That hammer thing in our journey that is repeating is intentional, because today we advocate Elixir for almost everything, much like what we did 10 years ago with Drupal. It is not the right kind of comparison, because Drupal is a product of a language, whereas Elixir is a language itself. Nevertheless, it is very easy to fall into the same hammer trap. So it is a good habit to have certain methodology to avoid falling into this same trap. So how do we ensure that we don't fall in the same mistakes that we did 10 years ago? At Thalam, we arrived at this three-step process. I feel this framework itself is generic enough to apply for any kind of organization with your own customization, in fact. So the first step is to have clarity on your own needs and, most importantly, your own constraints. For us at Thalam Auroville, small team size is a big constraint. Once you have the clarity of your needs and constraint, formulate your guiding principles. Don't create 10 or 20 principles. Just stick to 3 principles, as that is what is practically rememberable when you make choices. Then constantly evaluate your choices with guiding principles in mind. Let me walk you through these 3 steps for Thalam Auroville and explain how Elixir is a perfect match for us. What did we seek in Auroville? In simple terms, a language and a framework that helps us to build customized application with a small team, with the flexibility of adding more features as we grow, with a reasonable low maintenance, with rich user interface, with limited budget. With rich user interface is a very important point, because we want all things small, like small team, small budget, but we still need a rich user interface. So with this clarity, we arrived at 3 principles. As I said, resist the urge to make it 10 or 20 principles here. Just stick to 3 core principles. Borrowed from lean principles to software development, our needs and constraint turned out into these 3 guiding principles. Your needs might be different, and so will be your own guiding principles. This is for us. Eliminate waste, defer commitment, delight people. Once the guiding principles are formulated, constantly evaluate your choice of language and framework with these principles. Here is how we do this evaluation, for example. Against the guiding principle 1, which is to eliminate waste, we ask the following question. Is Elixir and Phoenix helping us to remove additional libraries or tech stacks? Does it help us to deliver fast and save time? Does it help us to reduce communication overheads? Does it help with delivering with less people? Against the guiding principle of 2, we ask the following questions. Does it defer large design choices until necessary? Does it offer flexibility of changing choices? Does it buy me more time? Against the guiding principle of 3, which is to delight people, we ask the following questions. Is it providing delight to the customer who is using it? Is it providing delight to the developers working on it? Does it help onboard new developers very quickly? Does it help to delight the management? How does Elixir and its ecosystem align with our guiding principles when developing new applications? Let's see. We'll be evaluating it 3 different use cases, 3 different products that we saw in the beginning: Thalam Pay, Matri booking system, and guest registration service. At Thalam Pay, as I said, we used umbrella architecture to defer commitment to split various services into its own project. When it is time to split services from Thalam Pay to separate projects, it is going to be relatively simpler, and we don't have to complicate the system today by making an yearly commitment. And for Matrimandir booking system, the app was developed by one part-time developer, which is a huge indication of productivity, which we can get from using Elixir and Phoenix. It is delightful for the developer to work. Even though it is a single person, this person was able to work without feeling any pressure. It is delightful for the management, as we can get more things get done at less cost. And it is delightful for the end users to have rich user interfaces using LiveView features. As I mentioned earlier, this guest house registration service, they asked for a very intuitive UI. Was it done without LiveView, it would have invited a huge number of JavaScript libraries, front-end frameworks to achieve the same results. Being able to deliver product with just core features built into Elixir's Phoenix LiveView is a huge elimination of wastage of time, wastage of resources, and wastage of money, not just today, but for the entire lifetime of the product. That's a huge saving by reducing this wastage for the entire life cycle of this product. In summary, Thalam is able to eliminate waste, defer commitment, and delight people, be it end users, management, or other developers with Elixir and Phoenix for all our current products. There are no hacky solutions, just clean implementation using features that are available in Elixir and the core of Phoenix LiveView. So now, moving on to the roadblocks we faced while moving to Elixir. There are three main roadblocks, I would say, that we faced in our migration to Elixir. Let's see one by one, which is one is cognitive biases, which has two subparts. And the second one is well-established practices and patterns, and a smaller community. Roadblock 1.1. While I was suggesting to migrate to Elixir for many of our older projects and for newer projects, there were always a few people advocating that we should try our old Drupal monolith stack or use WordPress with 100 other plugins to do things and get everything for free and do some minimal work on top of it. These are business people who are not technically strong, but have read somewhere on the internet or someone has told them that some X or Y is a great tool. These are well-intentioned people, and they would come and say, if this product works for the US government, then it should work for Auroville, right? I myself was at one point guilty of selling Drupal using the same argument. The logic was, if a software works for a larger organization, then it should also work for a smaller organization. These kinds of arguments carry within them a flaw that is very difficult to discern. The logic is flawed because just stating that a large organization is using a specific technology doesn't take into account the amount of capital and the human resources available with them to deliver that product. If the same is not available, even in a relative sense to your organization, choosing that technology doesn't give you the same effect. Roadblock 1.2, which is a cognitive bias, or I would say like a complexity bias, which also leads to a self-fulfilling prophecy. As Auroville is a decentralized organization where decisions are made by multiple stakeholders separately on what software is needed and in what technology that should be built on, I had more than one person to convince why Elixir is a great tool. Often people would ask me, Shankar, what's the technology you're going to use for this new product? And when I say Elixir, people would roll their eyes and say, I have never heard of this language. Do you have enough skilled people to support this software? Sometimes when I say it's a language that is built on the battle-tested Erlang VM, that's how we normally like to call Elixir. And these people, when they have some technical background, they would say, built on Erlang? Then it must be a really hard language to learn. To convince them that it is not true is not a very simple task because of the cognition bias towards Elixir based on the historical impression of what Erlang was built for and the developer experience around Erlang. Another cognitive bias due to Elixir's popularity at solving problems at web scale, which also I showed in the previous slide, which is like because it solves problem at web scale, This feature actually overshadows the fact that it's an easy language to learn. And because of this, people tend to think if a language solves complex problem, like how Elixir does, then it must be a complex language to learn. In my opinion, these two cognitive biases contribute to the slow adoption rate for new developers coming into Elixir, and this leads to an important self-fulfilling prophecy, which is, if it is difficult to learn or train, people in Elixir, which leads to the other result, which is it is difficult to find people who know Elixir or maintain project in future. So roadblock 2, this was a problem way back in 2016 and 17 when we started using Phoenix. But now I don't think this is still an issue. With the introduction of Phoenix context, umbrella projects, there is already a well-established pattern to follow to organize your code for different use cases. There are also hundreds of high-quality content, thanks to Jim and ElixirConf team, and various other conferences that there are best practices shared from real-world experiences. The number of books and video materials have also increased, that I don't think this is a problem for anyone starting with Elixir and Phoenix now. Roadblock 3, this is a side effect of the roadblock 1, and this is still a problem that needs to be solved for Elixir. Auroville attracts thousands of professional software developers every year. I'm yet to find a person who comes to Auroville with an Elixir knowledge. Right now, people who come to Auroville, like they can pick up Elixir quickly because of their previous experience with other technologies. Elixir community has come a long way from what it was in 2013 or 14, but there is still a lot of scope to grow. And I feel this is a shared responsibility for us, for all of us who are already using Elixir. Much of this, I strongly believe, also depends on the messaging that we deliver to the world on what Elixir is good for. The more clearer the message that Elixir is for anyone who wants productivity, irrespective of the size of the company, the better it is. So now moving on to the next session, which is I want to share what are the different developments in the Elixir community that excites us in Auroville, and how do we intend to use them in Auroville. I have categorized these into 3 distinct buckets: immediate future, near future, and a distant future. So the city of Auroville hasn't cracked its own higher education methodology yet. Students up to the age of 17 years have a highly individualistic path towards learning. However, when it comes to education beyond schooling, Auroville hasn't cracked a model. Last year, Thalam launched Y-Code, a 3-year course in software development for the youth of Auroville and its surrounding villages, which is offered as a gift with no price. Thalam team has integral yoga practitioners, business coaches, and technology experts. Building on top of the existing Y-Code program that was created last year, Elixir is strongly emerging as the core technology skill that we will be offering as part of this program, with FarmBot being one of the important projects for multidisciplinary study. FarmBot is primarily built on Elixir stack with Nerves framework and has a value system that closely aligns with that of what we want to create in Auroville. In short, we want to create a center for excellence in Elixir at Auroville, as we strongly believe investing our time with Elixir will be helpful for the city. This is a picture from the FarmBot website, not one from Auroville. As I speak today, we have just received our first FarmBot imported from the USA. We are exploring the possibility of cloud farming with FarmBot, which will help us with our own food security and sustainability. This is going to be a research project to identify and find ways to reduce manual labor, improve germination rate, algorithmically planned plantings. Near future. LiveView native is one project that we are closely following upon. Once it is close to production ready, our plan is to start using it to build mobile apps for Auroville. Just like how LiveView made all the front-end frameworks redundant for most of our use cases, Our hope and expectation is that this LiveView native will do the same thing for React Native and Flutter. Our bet is that LiveView native will contribute to our guiding principles even further by eliminating wastages and delivering delight. There are so many use cases for machine learning within Auroville. So far, it has not been explored, only limited by the human resources available to research in this area. Elixir's Bumblebee project is actually breaking boundaries and making it easy for us to use pre-trained models in Phoenix app. Sentiment analysis, budget forecasting, public opinion survey are some of the potential areas of work that we intend to deploy Elixir's Bumblebee in near future. And then this is the last one, which is distant future. How many of you here have read this book or online book called Network State by Balaji Srinivasan, CTO of, yeah, good. Balaji Srinivasan is the former CTO of Coinbase. So, okay. Network state is a proposition to build new countries that are cloud first and land lost. The concept, rationale, and the various values behind this network state are radically new, and it is highly technology dependent. I personally see Auroville as a perfect playground for this network state. This is a very distant future plan for Auroville, and as such, my hunch is that Elixir will play a huge role in powering this network state, which will be a mix of various technology that are emerging today. Digital twins, NFT and smart contracts, metaverse. If you haven't heard of network state, you might want to read How to Start a New Country by scanning this QR code. Moving on to a lighter topic, it would be bad on my part if I don't introduce my friend Hikari. There is a short story behind it. This talk would have been made easier if it had been last year. But having it this year, especially after March 14th, 2023, made it immensely difficult for me for two reasons. Any guesses on why is it so? Okay. Let me share. March 14th is when ChatGPT was released. ChatGPT's latest version was released. Okay. But why did ChatGPT make it difficult? The answer actually lies in the second question, the second reason. Any guesses again? No, I'll tell you. Because it's very difficult to guess unless you are someone in my family watching over all the conversations we had as I planned for this conference. And that is my brother, who is, over there. Don't get me wrong, he's a good brother. Whenever I shared a draft of my talk, he would just ask ChatGPT with a few more questions and would come and say, here is what ChatGPT says. Do you think it is relevant for the topic you are going to share? Does it complement it? And then he would finally end that note with saying, please take the assistance of ChatGPT. It has interesting views on the topic you are sharing. So all these days, as I prepared for this keynote, I had an AI constantly challenging me, and my brother, who was more impressed with ChatGPT's answer than mine. So at last, I befriended that AI when I realized ChatGPT could do something that I really appreciate, which is to write haikus. So it all started with this test I gave to ChatGPT. Can you write me a haiku on this quote? The most effective debugging tool is carefully thought. What is that? Yeah, is the most effective debugging tool is still carefully thought, coupled with judicious placed print statements. I think something is missing there. Okay, and then ChatGPT answered, code reveals its flaws, clear thought and print statements fix, debugging complete. Wow, I was impressed by this haiku, and I decided to use it as an assistant for this talk. So I even asked for its pen name, so I can properly attribute it in my slides. Then it thanked me and gave this wonderful reply and wanting it to be called as Hikari. So that's that's how Hikari came into picture. So I have Hikari writing haikus for the insights that I learned through my work at Auroville. And now, for the pleasant surprise, this is the last part of my talk. Here's a surprise for the Elixir community that I promised in the beginning. A 2-minute gratitude video from Auroville with love and deep respect for the Elixir community.
We are building Auroville's digital infrastructure on Elixir because of our shared values, the power of the commons. This is amazing. I thoroughly enjoy all the software built on Elixir. വളരെ സന്തോഷം.
என் வாழ்க்கை முன்னேற்றத்துக்கு பாதை வகுத்து தந்த எலிக்சர் கம்யூனிட்டிக்கு நன்றி.
Merci beaucoup Elixir Communauté pour nous aider à brancher à la monde entier financièrement pour qu'on peut vendre nos vidéos d'éducation de Kolam Yoga.
வணக்கம், என் பேர் காந்தி. நான் ஆரோவில் வெஸ்டர்ன் சென்டரில் இருக்கிற கியோஸ் கஃபேல மேனேஜராக வேலை செய்கிறேன். கஸ்டமர் பே பண்ணுறதுக்கு உங்கள் பேமெண்ட் சிஸ்டம் ரொம்ப ரொம்ப யூஸ்ஃபுல்லாக இருக்குது. தேங்க்யூ டு எலிக்சர் கம்யூனிட்டி.
ऑरोविल ऑनलाइन दान प्रबंधन प्रणाली जो दुनिया भर से समर्थन के साथ हमारी 100 परियोजनाओं को निधि देती है, एलिक्सर और फीनिक्स द्वारा संचालित है. मैं एलिक्सर समुदाय को धन्यवाद देती हूँ.
Hi, my name's Don. I work here in Auroville at Savi, where we welcome hundreds of volunteers every month. And the software that Talam designed for us using Elixir and Phoenix is really instrumental in helping us do our work.
Hey, I'm Naren, part of BCC team, which does coordination of budget of the community, and the tool which really helps us is Elixir. Thank you.
Auroville வாலண்டியர் கம்யூனிட்டிக்கு ஹெல்ப் பண்ணுற ஒசே வேலிம் மற்றும் எலிக்சர் கம்யூனிட்டிக்கு என்னுடைய மனமார்ந்த நன்றிகள்.
धन्यवादः होजे, क्रिस, जस्टिन, फ्रैंक, शॉन, एरिक, मिकाल तथा संपूर्ण एलिक्सिर समुदायं यत्ते उदारतापूर्वकम् ऑरोविल तथा विश्वाय अमूल्यं सॉफ्टवेयर दत्तवन्तः.
Our first love with programming is with Elixir. We learn and share Elixir knowledge in the local community as a gift. So thank you Elixir community. Elixir community ku row podunga.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. As a community, every contribution is valid, be it the time you spend on reporting a bug or documenting a feature or providing a well-written PR. It is impossible to name all of you in this video, and hence Jose Valim, Chris McCord, and a few others are named here as a representation of every one of you who has contributed to this Elixir community. Thank you, Elixir community, with love and deep respect. So that concludes my session for today. I don't know if we have time for Q&A. Yeah, Jim?
Yes, thank you very much for that. We do have some time for questions. Do we have any questions for Shankar? No questions? All right. Oh, got a question over here.
Hey, thank you very much for the talk. Very inspiring. I guess so. You kind of hinted at what I'm going to ask. So the city of Auroville already had a tech stack and the team working on it. Do you have any tips for us to get involved in our local communities and start like helping? Because I think for most cities we won't have even a tech stack to begin with.
Yeah. What was the question? Can you repeat again? I didn't.
So, do you have any tips on
Tips
getting
on-
involved with our local communities?
Okay. One thing is one thing that I found very good with the open source community is that there is already the culture of coming together and sharing knowledge very openly and freely. And one of the things that I did yearly in Auroville is also to teach people Elixir and teach whatever I learned through what I learned and through the internet and through various online communities. And by having this teachings, shared trainings, I was able to bring in more people together, and that's how we started building and helping software for Auroville. So if there is one thing that you can do is to create a local community of people who can come together and learn and work together. And many of these softwares that we build for Auroville is something that we also want to open source. We haven't done all these things. The intention is to open source, and it's just that we need to do a lot of cleanups, remove things that are not Auroville specific, and then it will be open sourced.
So one of the benefits of adopting Elixir and Phoenix is being able to delay the big choices and then to change later on. One software guru already in the 1980s said that the domain model is the stable element, and the features with the user ones are the unstable ones. Is this also used or applied in your Elixir approach, or do you have different mechanisms to be able to delay and introduce commitments and choices later on?
Okay. So the delay in making big choices, as I referred to in my slide, is around Phoenix umbrella, which is specifically how it helps us in Auroville. Because normally the tendency is to actually think about future plans and too quickly split out services as different components, thinking that it would be better if they are living alone, like standalone, so that it can be scaled somewhere in the distant future. But having it in Phoenix umbrella, actually we get that same kind of isolation, a near isolation that is needed for developers to think about work in isolation, but it also removes the need for too early optimization, wherein you need to bring in, for example, things like queues for communicating between different services. So right now we are using one shared database, which is shared by multiple web apps sitting within the same Phoenix umbrella. And we could easily scale it up in future when it requires to have them as separate services or using separate databases. At that time, it's not going to cost us more to take a service out of our Phoenix umbrella app. So that's the point I was sharing about.
Any other questions?
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you.